I hadn't planned on going. The only reason I ended up at that reunion was because Grandma personally called me from her landline, which she still used like it was 1992, and said she wanted all her grand boys under the same roof for her 85th. And when Grandma asked for something, you didn't say no, not even if it meant driving 6 hours after a full shift, arriving in a shirt that still smelled faintly of garlic from the last restaurant drop, and walking into a hotel ballroom filled with people who had written you off before you ever got the chance to stand on your own 2 feet. My name's Marcus Bell, and I've been underestimated for as long as I can remember. That reunion was a cathedral to that fact. Everyone was there. The engineers, the financial analysts, the dentist cousins with their shiny veneers, the real estate mogul uncle who'd been under quiet IRS scrutiny for years but still acted like he was the blueprint. My brother Nathan, though, he was the main event. The prodigal son, the Ivy League grad, the one who made it out and then made sure no one ever forgot it. He was everything our father used to wish I'd be: polished, articulate, completely devoid of empathy. He was also the reason I left home at 17 with nothing but a duffel bag and a chip on my shoulder big enough to crack pavement. I made it to the ballroom at 6:02 p.m., 2 minutes past the invitation time, and somehow still the last one to arrive. I caught my reflection in one of the mirrored pillars near the buffet, hair combed, jacket decent, shoes passable. I looked like someone who tried, which, in this family, might as well have been a scarlet letter. As I walked in, I felt the shift in air, that subtle hush that rolls through a group when someone unexpected enters the scene. Not in awe, in curiosity, in judgment. Look who decided to show. Nathan's voice carried from the front of the room like it was on a mic. He stood near the head table, glass of white wine in one hand, the other casually resting on the shoulder of his fiancée, a brittle smiling woman named Claire who looked like she could detect poverty through sin alone. Marcus Bell, our family's own blue-collar legend, he added, loud enough to stir laughter from the cousins near the bar. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just walked to my seat, which, as I quickly realized, was all the way at the end of the table, next to the ice sculpture shaped like a swan that was already melting into a shallow puddle. Everyone had name tags printed in a neat gold script. Mine said, Marcus Bell, professional steering wheel enthusiast. I stared at it for a few seconds, long enough to hear the stifled giggles around me. Nathan clinked his glass. Just having a little fun, bro, he said. Come on, we all know you've got thick skin from all that long-haul driving. Besides, we can't all be stuck in corner offices, right? I can see my mother's eyes darting nervously down the table, my aunt whispering something behind her hand. My father, who hadn't spoken more than 5 words to me since I dropped out of college to help a friend with his delivery startup, was already 2 drinks deep, swirling his scotch like he couldn't wait for it to be over. Yeah, I said calmly, peeling the name tag off and folding it in half. Just jokes. I excused myself before the appetizers arrived. Went out to the parking lot and sat in my truck, letting the engine hum beneath me like a steady heartbeat. That was the thing about Nathan. He didn't stab you with knives. He used spotlights, humiliation as a tool, laughter as a weapon. He knew how to orchestrate a crowd. He knew how to bury a man with applause. And for most of my life, I'd let him. Not that night. Because what Nathan didn't know, what no one in that damn ballroom knew, was that for the past 6 years, while I was out driving trucks, I had quietly been building something he couldn't touch. It started with that delivery startup I joined when I was 19. We were just 2 guys with a van and a dream, getting orders wrong half the time and barely breaking even. But I stuck with it, even when my partner bailed 2 years in. I learned the trade, learned logistics, warehousing, freight, distribution networks, learned how people move things, and more importantly, how money follows those movements. By the time I was 25, I had my own fleet of 5 trucks, a leased warehouse outside of town, and 3 contracts with regional food suppliers. By 28, I'd negotiated deals with 2 grocery chains, partnered with a tech firm to integrate route optimization, and registered the business under a holding company with my name on 0 public documents. I kept it quiet, purposefully, because revenge, when done right, doesn't knock. It waits behind the door with a deed and a clipboard. That night in the parking lot, I didn't think about walking away. I thought about the building I'd closed on the week before, a prime downtown commercial space Nathan had tried and failed to acquire through his startup consultancy firm. He didn't know who outbid him. He would. Soon. I went back inside just as dessert was being served. Sat through the slideshow of old family photos, the awkward toasts, the barely veiled questions about whether I was still single or still driving, all of which I answered with the same tight smile and short nod. Nathan gave a speech. Of course he did. He talked about legacy, about grit, about how this family's backbone was built by men who never took the easy route, all while looking directly at me, like he was daring me to break. I didn't. I waited. Because some people are fireworks, all noise and flash. And some people are fuse wire, silent, slow-burning, inevitable. That was me. A month later, Nathan lost his biggest client. They cited poor ROI. A week after that, his office lease was revoked due to new ownership restructuring. 2 weeks later, a recruitment firm began quietly headhunting his senior staff. And 3 months after the reunion, Nathan Bell walked into an interview at a mid-sized logistics firm he'd never heard of, desperate and downplaying it. He didn't recognize me when I walked into the room. Not at first. I wore a tailored suit. No name tag. Just a quiet, still expression. He looked up, confused, eyes narrowing. Do I know you? I sat down across from him, opened the folder with his resume, and said, You called me a steering wheel enthusiast. That was clever. The color drained from his face. Your potential employer, I said. Let's begin. Because humiliation fades. But power? Power has a memory. I didn't offer him water. Didn't shake his hand. I sat there at the conference table, my elbows resting lightly on the glossy surface as Nathan fidgeted in the stiff-backed chair across from me. His resume sat in front of me like a prop in a play we both suddenly realized had taken a turn. I didn't recognize the company name, he said after a beat, his voice flat but trying for confident. No one does, I replied. We stay quiet. Keeps us focused. He tried to laugh, that same casual snicker he used when he lied to Dad about breaking the garage window back in '03, or when he told Grandma her casserole wasn't burnt, just rustic. It didn't work now. So, this is your company? He asked, more cautious now. I thought you were still driving trucks. I interrupted, keeping my tone neutral. I was. Now I own 46. In the routes. In the real estate under 3 of your old client offices. I watched that land on him. Not like a slap, like gravity. Slow and unrelenting. So what is this? He asked, gesturing around the room. You setting me up? Getting revenge. This is business, I said calmly. We have a role that needs filling. You applied. I interviewed you. That's all. He blinked. For the first time in my life, I saw it, doubt behind his eyes. Nathan, the man made of ego and inherited smugness, was recalculating. And what's the role? He asked. Client relations specialist. Entry level. Entry level? He repeated, like I'd offered him a dish of warm spit. I'm overqualified. Overqualified and unemployed, I said, flipping his resume closed. Or you can work. Earn back some of what you lost. It's your call. He leaned back in the chair, folded his arms. This is beneath me. No, I said softly. This is exactly where you are. You just never looked down before. I stood. Take the weekend. Let me know Monday. I left him in that room, surrounded by polished wood and silence. The same silence I'd eaten with for years after our parents praised his every breath while criticizing my every blink. The same silence I'd sat with in motel rooms between routes, building systems, designing routes, creating a logistics empire from the bones of every insult I'd swallowed. Nathan didn't call on Monday. He showed up. At 7:58 a.m., 2 minutes early, in a wrinkled blazer and last year's shoes. He signed the paperwork, shook the HR rep's hand, and avoided my office entirely. For the first 3 weeks, I said nothing to him directly. I didn't need to. His training manager was instructed to treat him like any other new hire. No special treatment. No shortcuts. No favors. When I walked the floor, I could feel him tense behind his cubicle wall, pretending not to watch me. And every time he passed me in the hallway, he nodded and said, Morning, sir. Not Marcus. Not bro. Sir. I didn't demand it. I never corrected him. But he kept saying it. Like a penance. Like a prayer. It wasn't about cruelty. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. This wasn't petty. It was correction. Justice, not vengeance. I let his work speak for itself. And to be fair, he was good. Nathan was always smart. He picked up systems fast, navigated client calls with polish, learned our CRM in record time. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't yet comprehend, was that I had no intention of simply keeping him under me. I wanted him to rise. To climb. Because the higher he got, the more he'd depend on me. The more he'd realize I was the foundation. That without me, everything he touched crumbled. At the 6-month mark, I called him into my office. You've done well, I said simply. I'm promoting you to strategic partnerships. More responsibility. More travel. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just nodded. Eyes locked on mine like he was still waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Just purpose. Within a year, he was managing 2 regions. At meetings, he presented confidently. At family gatherings, of which there were fewer and fewer, he spoke little. He never brought up the reunion. Never made another joke about my job. Grandma noticed. She always noticed. At her 86th, she pulled me aside. Your brother's changed, she said, watching him from across the lawn. He looks like he's finally listening. I shrugged. Maybe life got louder. She smiled. Kissed my cheek. You always had the long game in you, Marcus. I learned from the best, I replied. And I had. From her. From the silence. From the rooms they thought I didn't belong in. I turned it all into strategy. Into structure. Into power. 2 years in, I gave Nathan equity. Not much. Just enough to anchor him. Just enough for him to tell people, I work for my brother. He runs the whole thing. Just enough for him to carry my name like a badge, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. And that, more than any name tag joke, was the real crown. Because he'd finally learned who I was. And more importantly, who I had always been. There's a strange silence that comes after power is no longer a goal, but a condition. When you're no longer climbing, no longer chasing, but sitting in the center of everything they said you'd never have. That was where I lived now. My office overlooked the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist decor. A thick mahogany desk I had custom-built by a craftsman who used to be homeless until my company gave him a logistics position he turned into a management track. I hired people like that. People like me. People who'd been laughed at, overlooked, talked over. I believed in the quiet ones. Nathan was in the conference room next door when I got the call. It was from my mother. I hadn't spoken to her directly in almost a year. She usually passed messages through Grandma or sent generic holiday texts. But this time, she was calling for real. I picked up. Dad's sick, she said. No preamble. Heart failure. He's in surgery. I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask why she was calling now. I just said, where is he? And 2 hours later, I was in the waiting room of St. Gregory's, coffee in one hand. My name on every nurse's check-in list. My mother barely looked at me when I arrived. She was sitting alone, clutching her purse like it was an oxygen tank. You came, she said flatly. He's still your father. I came for Grandma, I replied. She'd want someone here who stays until the end. You're cruel, she muttered. No, I said. I'm honest. You just never liked the sound of truth. She didn't respond. But she didn't argue either. Nathan showed up an hour later. Tie loosened. Eyes tired. Hey, he said softly. I nodded. How is he? Alive. For now. We didn't say much after that. Just sat there. Side by side. Silent. When the surgeon came out and said Dad made it through but would need months of recovery, something changed in the air. Not forgiveness. Just stillness. The kind that comes when the noise finally collapses. Nathan stayed behind. I went back to work. For a while, things returned to their rhythm, contracts, expansion, quarterly reviews. Nathan was thriving. He'd started mentoring new hires. Made smart partnerships. Brought in 2 new clients, both of which doubled our monthly distribution revenue. But I knew him. Knew how he moved when no one was watching. Knew the way his ego crouched when it was threatened. I started noticing discrepancies, small ones. A lunch written off as a client meeting when no one from the client showed up. A vendor overcharging us by 12%, which he dismissed as industry fluctuation. I let it go. At first. But then I had my internal auditor run a quiet sweep. What we found wasn't theft. It was worse. It was pride. Nathan had been funneling small bonuses into a shell company registered under an alias when he used to court a client we'd turned down because of ethics violations. The same client who had gotten multiple contractors sued for labor infractions overseas. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. I built that relationship, he said. They trust me. We could triple our expansion with one signature. At what cost? I asked. You want slave labor in the supply chain just to boost Q4? He stepped forward, fire in his eyes. You think you're better than me just because you own the building now? I carried this company half the way here. You carried nothing, I snapped. You were a passenger with a loud mouth and a fragile ego. I gave you a second chance. You tried to turn it into a side hustle. I deserve more, he said quietly. You deserve exactly what you've earned, I replied. And right now, That's an exit package and a 6-month non-compete clause. You'd fire your own brother? He asked, disbelief cracking his voice. No, I said, rising from my desk. You fired yourself the moment you forgot what got you in the door. He didn't say another word, just stared at me for a long moment, jaw tight, hands trembling. Then he left. He didn't fight it, didn't argue. He just vanished. The board was informed. Legal locked it down. His access was revoked within the hour. I called Grandma the next morning and told her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. She sighed, deep and heavy. You always tried to do right by him, she said. And he always thought you were playing checkers. I replied. He just didn't realize I'd flipped the board and taught myself chess. She laughed at that. The kind of laugh that holds pride and pain in equal measure. But the fallout wasn't over. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a manila envelope, full of photographs, screenshots, emails, all from Nathan, trying to prove I had stolen the company from him. He'd sent it to investors, clients, even press contacts. It was a smear campaign. Weak, desperate, sloppily executed. But it was real, and it was public. For 48 hours, my name trended on Twitter. Not with scandal, with speculation. Some sided with Nathan. Most didn't. Our clients held firm. Our partners didn't blink. But the damage wasn't in dollars. It was in the betrayal. Again, I called a press conference. Just 10 minutes. No teleprompter. Just me. A mic. And the truth. My brother was given a seat at this table not because of blood, but because of belief. He broke that trust. I won't pretend otherwise. But I didn't build this company on family. I built it on accountability. That hasn't changed. That never will. The backlash evaporated within a week. Our stock jumped. The board reaffirmed its support. And Nathan? He disappeared again. I heard rumors he was consulting in Texas. That he'd shaved his head and started giving TED Talks. That he was trying to rebrand. I didn't care. He could rewrite his story 1,000 times. But he would never touch mine again. Because now, I wasn't just the kid he laughed at. I was the man who handed him the pen and watched him sign his own exit. And someday, he'd realize the real inheritance wasn't money. It was legacy. And he gave his away the moment he called me a joke in front of the family. I thought the fire was out. Thought the damage was sealed behind contracts, clauses, and a clean reputation. But betrayal never ends where it's supposed to. It echoes, especially when it's family. It had been 4 months since Nathan's smear campaign imploded. For months since I'd locked the doors behind him and continued building what he tried to bury. The business was booming. We'd expanded into 4 new states. We acquired a small firm out of Denver, and I'd been in meetings with investors to build a data-integrated dispatch system that would automate 80% of our routing. I was on the edge of something bigger, something generational. But then I got the letter. Real paper. Handwritten. Postmarked from a rural town 3 counties away. No name. Just my address in block letters. Inside, a single line, scrawled in familiar, sharp slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. Come home. Before they sell it. I knew what home meant. Not the apartment I grew up in. Not the condo where my parents lived after Dad's heart surgery. The house. Grandpa's house. The one with the crooked porch and the oak tree that shaded the whole front yard like a living curtain. The house where I learned to swing a hammer. Where Grandma taught me to make coffee without measuring. Where Nathan and I used to race Matchbox cars down the hallway while Dad yelled about scuffing the trim. That house. I hadn't stepped foot inside it since the week after Grandpa died. I drove out on a Sunday. No traffic. Just cold wind and old memories pressing against the windows like ghosts with good aim. When I pulled up, I saw the sign in the yard. For sale, by appointment only. The grass was overgrown. The porch sagged worse than I remembered. But the bones were still there. Solid. Familiar. Mine. Or at least, they should have been. I called the number on the sign and asked for a tour. They scheduled me for the next morning. I stayed in a motel that night, couldn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling and replayed every Sunday dinner, every scraped knee, every time I walked out of that house with my head down while Nathan walked out with a smile and a pat on the back. At 9 a.m. sharp, a real estate agent met me at the porch. Middle-aged. Blazer too tight. Smile too big. "You're Marcus?" she asked. "Yes." "You related to the Bells?" "I am the Bells." She hesitated but opened the door. The air inside hit me like a punch. Dust. Lemon cleaner. A hint of fireplace. My childhood. My inheritance. The house was signed over to your brother 2 years ago, she said as we walked through the hallway. Part of a quick transfer before probate finished. I stopped walking. Probate. There was a dispute. Something about an unsigned amendment to the will. It never held up. So the property went to the next of kin, your father, then Nathan. Not you. I didn't respond. Just kept walking. Room by room. The kitchen still had the ceramic rooster Grandma kept by the window. The living room had indentations in the carpet where the old recliner used to sit. The master bedroom had a dent in the drywall where Grandpa once threw a book during an argument and later patched it with toothpaste. I could still see the shape. You interested in making an offer? The agent asked, trying to sound casual. Maybe, I said. Do you have the listing documents? In the car, she said. I'll grab them. She left. I stood in the hallway, facing the old guest room. Mine. The door was shut. I opened it. Inside was a cardboard box. 1. Labeled in marker, Marcus, do not toss. I dropped to my knees. Inside, my old pocket knife. A comic book. A cassette tape with my name in Grandpa's handwriting. And a letter. Folded. Yellowed. I opened it. Marcus, if you're reading this, it means someone tried to erase you. Maybe they already have. I couldn't stop them in life, but maybe I can still leave a seed behind. This house should have been yours. You're the only one who ever saw it, who understood it. But I didn't write the will fast enough, and your father was quicker with paperwork than I was with words. I'm sorry for that. I hope this letter makes it to you. If it doesn't, make them remember. You are my legacy. Not Nathan. Not your father. You. Don't let them take the roots. Plant something bigger. Grandpa, I sat there on the floor for a long time. When the agent came back in, I was already on the phone. Not with a lawyer. With a developer I knew. One with cash, connections, and a quiet love for history. I want to buy a property through you, I said. But not to tear down. I want it preserved. Which one? The Bell House. Doesn't your brother? Not for long. Within 3 weeks, the sale was closed. Cash. No negotiation. Nathan never even knew who bought it. The agent just called him, told him a buyer came in at full asking, wanted quick possession. He accepted. Moved the rest of his stuff out overnight. I walked in the next day with a locksmith and changed every bolt, every hinge, every lock. That afternoon, I sat in the living room with the cassette tape and an old player I'd bought from a thrift store. It clicked, word, then crackled. Then Grandpa's voice. You've always had your own way, kid. Keep walking it. One day, they'll follow or fall behind. I smiled. The house wasn't a trophy. It was a monument. Not to revenge. To survival. To endurance. To memory. A week later, I invited Grandma. She cried when she saw the porch fixed. When she saw the photos I'd rehung. When she saw the box I'd placed in the center of the room with Grandpa's tape, the knife, the letter. You saved it, she whispered. No, I said. It saved me. She hugged me tight, bones brittle, arms strong. You should throw a party, she said. One of those housewarming ones. Invite everyone. Let them see what they tried to bury. I shook my head. Not yet. Then when? She asked. I looked at the front door. The new locks. The new deed. The old soul. When it's time, I said. And they'll know. Because the house didn't speak in words. It spoke in echoes. And one day, they'd all hear what it had to say. The invitation was simple. One envelope. No frills. Cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering that read, You're invited to celebrate a new chapter in the Bell family legacy. Address enclosed. Attendance required. I mailed it to every branch of the tree, aunts, uncles, cousins, even second cousins who hadn't shown up since Grandma's second husband passed. I mailed one to my parents. I mailed one to Nathan. I didn't add a return address. Didn't sign it. But I knew they'd come. Curiosity is a powerful magnet, especially in families built on control. I waited 3 weeks. Then I opened the house. Cleaned every room. Waxed the floors. Set out food, catered, elegant, warm. Every dish was something Grandma used to make. I placed a single long wooden table in the center of the living room. Hand-carved. Handmade. Seats for 20. No place cards. No seating chart. Just a long, equal table where no one sat at the head. At 4 p.m. sharp, the first car arrived. Then another. Then 5 more. The family poured in, faces tight with confusion, curiosity, maybe even guilt. Some tried to play it cool. Others hugged me like they hadn't spent years pretending I was just the quiet one. My father walked in wearing the same navy blazer he wore the night he gave Nathan his first set of golf clubs. He nodded at me, said, "Son," and looked away. My mother clutched her purse again. She always did that when the room wasn't hers. And then Nathan arrived. Last. Of course. He wore a muted gray suit, no tie, and that same smug shadow he always used to hide his panic. He didn't say anything. Just looked around. Took it all in. Saw the photos on the wall. Saw the newly restored porch. Saw the title documents framed above the fireplace, Bell Residence, EST 1971. Restored 2025. Owner, Marcus Bell. The room hushed. I stood at the center. Cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming," I said. This house meant something to all of us. But not all of us remembered what it stood for. It wasn't just walls and beams. It was roots. And you don't rip out roots for convenience. I shifted. Nathan stared at the floor. When Grandpa died, I stayed quiet. When the will vanished, I stayed quiet. When this house was sold, I stayed quiet. And when Nathan mocked me at the reunion, I stayed quiet. A flicker of discomfort moved through the room. But silence isn't the same as weakness, I continued. It's the space where strength is built. And tonight, I wanted to open this house to you all. Not as a symbol of power, but of proof. I gestured around the room. That legacy doesn't come from inheritance. It comes from action, from choices, from who shows up after the applause fades. Grandma nodded from her seat at the table. "I'd like to say something," she said. I stepped aside. She stood, slow but steady. "You all knew Marcus had heart," she said. "You just didn't know it came with teeth. He's not just the one who saved this house. He's the one who saved what it meant to be a Bell." My father cleared his throat. "We didn't know." I looked at him. "You didn't ask." He lowered his eyes. "We were wrong." "Yes," I said. "You were." I turned to Nathan. "Would you like to say anything?" He looked up. His mouth opened. Closed. Then he said, "No. You've said enough for both of us." I nodded. "Then sit. Eat. Be present. That's all that's required tonight." Everyone took their seats. No one rushed to the front. No one dared to claim a head. They just sat. Equal. Still. Together. We ate in silence for a while. Then the stories started, old ones, about Grandma's garden, about Grandpa's obsession with duct tape, about the time Nathan fell through the ice in the back pond, and I pulled him out before anyone else noticed. That was the first time he looked me in the eye that night. "You always pulled me out," he said. "Even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. After dessert, people lingered. No one rushed to leave. It was the first time I saw my family as a circle, not a ladder. When they finally began trickling out, one by one, Nathan was the last to leave. He stood by the doorway, fingers brushing the frame like it might vanish. "You rebuilt it all," he said. "Not just the house." "No," I said. "I rebuilt me. The house just caught up." "So what now?" he asked. "Do we go back to pretending we were ever brothers?" I shook my head. "No. We start acting like we finally are." He nodded slowly. Then, with the faintest smile, he said, "Good night, sir." I almost laughed. "Not tonight," I said. "Tonight, just Marcus." He left. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the night settle over the street. The house behind me was warm. Whole. Mine. But more than that, it was right. And for the first time in years, I felt still. Not silent. Not waiting. Just complete. Because revenge might start with pain. But legacy ends with peace. And I had both. The joke was over. The house stood. And so did I.